Director Leonard,
Present.
Director Seamson,
Present.
Director Taylor,
In attendance.
Chair Peterson.
Present.
We have 5 committee members present.
The chair will now ask the secretary to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The chair invites any members of the audience who wish to participate to do so and asks that those who do not wish to participate please remain silent during the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is being conducted in person from the Central Services Building. In order to allow as much public access and participation as possible, this meeting also is being broadcast via live stream on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we will have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la Junta Escolar de las Escuelas Públicas de Milwaukee. Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor llame al 312-626-6799. Nuevamente, 312-626-6799. E introduzca el número de reunión 608-130-5362. Nuevamente, el número de reunión es 608-130-5362. Gracias.
Gracias. For each of our items of business, we will hold a discussion and public hearing. Those who wish to speak on tonight's items were required to register to speak in advance of the start of the meeting. When you are called upon to speak, please state your name and spell your last name for the record. I ask those who are waiting to speak virtually to remain on the platform until you are called upon to speak. After a speaker's time is up, they may continue to follow the meeting at one of the broadcast options mentioned previously. For the sake of fairness and to give everyone a chance to speak, the chair reserves the right to limit the length of time allowed to any one speaker. Written testimony will be accepted. For transmittal to the board, send the testimony to the Office of Board Governance, P.O. Box 2181, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53201, or fax 414-475-8071, or email to governance@milwaukee.k12.wi.us. Just as a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order dictates that all comments should be directed to the chair of the committee. Also, any questions or requests, including those from the public, committee members, or administration, are to be directed toward the chair, who will determine the most efficient way to address them. Please be respectful of the democratic process adhered to by the board for the safety of all and to ensure the good order of the meeting. Harassment or intimidation tactics of any kind will not be tolerated. Anyone persisting in disrupting the process will be asked to leave or will be escorted from the meeting and not allowed to return. Anyone ejected from the meeting may continue to listen to the meeting or access the agenda items online. Also, no one other than members of the board, designated staff, and those who have been invited to present or participate in items of business will be allowed on the stage before, during, or after meetings of the board and its committees. Also, for a listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting the meetings, agenda, and minutes page on the MPS website and choosing Online Agendas. Now, let us begin. Madam Secretary, item 1.
Item 1 is action on a request to approve the revisions to Administrative Policy 8.13, student attendance, absences, tardies, and Administrative Policy and Procedure 8.14 on truancy, and to adopt Administrative Procedure 8.13, student attendance, absences, and tardies. The recommendation is that the Board, 1, approve the revisions to Administrative Policy 8.13, student attendance, absence, and tardies, and Administrative Policy and Procedure 8.14, truancy. And 2, adopt Administrative Procedure 8.13, student attendance, absence, and tardies, as presented in the attachments to this item.
Thank you. Will the administration please present the item?
Good evening, Chair Peterson and members of the committee. Keith Posley, Superintendent of Schools. This evening, the administration brings revisions to Administrative Policy and Administrative Procedure 8.14 related to truancy and Administrative Policy 8.13 related to student attendance, absence, and tardiness. Additionally, we bring for adoption Administrative Procedure 8.13 related to student attendance. This evening, I have with me Mr. Matthew Boswell, Senior Director of Student Services, and Nicole Coleman, Student Services Specialist, to share the revisions and requested adoption. Following her presentation, we'll be more than happy to entertain any questions that you may have in regards to this item. Nicole?
President Peterson, members of the committee. Nicole Coleman, Specialist 3, Student Services. As a district, we should conduct periodic reviews of policies and procedures that impact student outcomes. Attendance is one of those areas in which we are constantly reviewing best practices. The revisions to administrative policies 8.13, attendance, absences, tardies, administrative policy 8.14, truancy, and procedure 8.14, incorporates best practices, clarifies expectations for school staff and families, and streamlines the attendance-taking process and truancy procedures. The Department of Student Services worked with school social workers and district-level staff to review and revise the policies being brought forward this evening. They have been reviewed with and approved by the Assistant City Attorney. And so before I begin, I'd like to ask permission to review all of the policies in their entirety and then take questions at the end.
Sounds good.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
So I will begin with Administrative Policy 8.13. And I'll start on page 1 of the policy, and you will see that in parent C, under 1, the overview, we struck "are required to" and replaced with "shall." We struck the word "general" from item bullet 1 to replace with "daily" attendance, with "daily" for daily attendance calculation. Under 2, period attendance calculation, we struck the 70% to replace with 66%, which is consistent with the Department of Public Instruction's criteria for a student being considered absent for the entire day. We also struck the example there too. And at the bottom, we also struck the language "must" and replaced with "shall." On page 2 of that same policy, under legally excused absences, we have added 2 additional items for legally excused absences: K for incarceration and L for verifiable instances of the bus not stopping at a designated bus stop. And in 2B, we struck the word "can" and replaced with "may." On page 3, under tardies, in general, all of the musts, "ares," and "wills" have been struck and replaced with "shall" for consistency and clarity of expectations. In section 3B(C), number 2C, we struck the entire sentence so that we could include language stating that students who leave the bus stop after 20 minutes are to be marked absent unless a parent calls. And I should say that's in extreme weather. In which case, if the school can verify that the bus was late by more than 20 minutes or didn't show, the student must be excused from attendance. And lastly, on page 4, under school notification, we added attendance office and struck "by phone or any other means" from 4A. And in section 5, we added a C to state that in schools where period attendance is taken, the parent shall be notified after the first missed period. And that concludes Administrative Policy 8.13. Administrative Procedure, which is being recommended for adoption, attendance, absence, and tardies. In general, the new procedure for 8.13 codifies the procedural expectations for taking attendance and properly coding absences and tardies. On page 1, section 1, it outlines general attendance taking expectations for schools, specifically within the first 10 minutes of the school day for daily attendance schools and within the first 10 minutes of the class period for period attendance schools. It also states that verification of attendance must be conducted by the attendance personnel by the end of the day for daily attendance schools and after each period in a period attendance school. Section 2 outlines procedures for documenting legally excused absences that align with both state statute and board policy. This includes updating attendance using the appropriate attendance code once notification has been given by the parent, maintaining documentation of parental notification of absences for a minimum of 2 years, and guidelines for addressing educationally beneficial activities, extended absences, and instances of the bus not showing in extreme weather. On page 2, section 2B, under personal illness, provides direction for how to reflect ongoing medical concerns that don't qualify for home and hospital, which include obtaining written medical statements from a physician, submitting the statement to a regional superintendent for approval, and providing academic support through a licensed teacher. Section 3, tardies, specifies that schools will use a multi-tiered system of support for addressing tardiness and absenteeism, and schools will have a check-in procedure to document the time and reason for a tardy to school. In period attendance schools, there will be a structure for ensuring that students have a tardy pass and that the passes can be tracked to update student attendance, and that students are allowed to proceed to their current class after obtaining the appropriate documentation. Part 3, school notification, expresses the parent responsibility for contacting the school attendance office to inform them of absences and the procedures for schools to retrieve those calls daily, update the student attendance, and maintain the documentation for a minimum of 2 years. Section 5, under parental notification, details the expectations for schools to notify parents within 2 hours of an unexcused absence or after the first missed period in daily attendance schools. It specifically addresses the responsibility for following up with the family by any other means if the initial contact is unsuccessful. And that concludes the proposed administrative procedures 8.13. 8.14, truancy. Overall, it seeks to reorganize key areas under 8 appropriate headings. It adds language from the procedure which are categorized as policy. So on page 1, general principles was renamed to definitions. And under section 1, we removed item 1C and 1D, and we merged it under 2A and 2B. And section 2, which was parental notification, was renamed identifying truant students, and we struck language from 2A and 2B, and then we moved that under 3A, 3B, which is parental notification. On page 2, you'll see that 2C and 2D were struck in their entirety because we've moved them to the administrative procedure, 8.14. Under 3, parental notification is a renaming which was disputing student truancy. And on page 3, we have section 4, habitual truancy, which is a new addition. It defines a habitual truant, makes clear that the school shall mail the truancy letter once the student has been identified under the guidelines. It follows and that schools will follow the district truancy plan as outlined in procedure 8.14 and make the appropriate legal referrals as needed. In section 5, 6, and 7, reflect a renaming of headings or renumeration of headings due to the aforementioned changes. And 6A strikes no public school may, and replaces with the district schools shall not. Section 7, truancy prevention interventions, strikes the list of specific interventions and replaces that entire list with the multi-tiered system of support to prevent and intervene with. That concludes the changes to 8.14 truancy. And lastly, we have Administrative Procedure 8.14 Truancy Plan. So similar to Administrative Policy 8.14, the Administrative Procedure removes items that speak to policy and replaces them with actual procedures. On page 1, the entirety of Section 1A, identifying truancy, has been stricken as the entirety of that section is now referenced in the policy. Section 1B has been renumbered 1A due to the previous strike, and 1B1 has new language that defines a habitual truant, and 1B3 strikes the last sentence, and we're going to move that to subparagraph B on page 2. On page 2, number 5 has been renumbered to 4. It also strikes language to streamline the expectations for maintaining an electric record of the habitual original truancy letter that has been mailed to the parent or guardian. On page 3, section D, which is still considered to be part of level 1, universal attendance practices have been stricken as they are covered in the policy. And under level 2, under 2A, item 3, we've added language that clarifies the expectation for the school social worker to run the attendance data to identify students and intervene when they acquire 8 or more unexcused absences. 2A and 4 has been struck and moved to level 3B under the legal referrals. On page 4, we've merely replaced must with shall and added miscellaneous language that we've added for clarity around the programming. And on page 5, under level 3, 3A strikes the last sentence because that TAP's warning letter has been moved later on in level 3 below. 3B, 1A adds the language regarding TAP's warning letters being generated at 15 unexcused absences. 3B, 1B changes must to may as it outlines the school's discretion in generating a TAP's referral for students who reach 25 absences, and in reference to schools requesting a citation when the students reach 25 unexcused absences. 3B1C provides clarifying language related to the TAB's referral. And lastly, on page 6, 3B2A, we've added 2 additional numbers, I and double I. They detail the exceptions to the district attorney referral process to allow discretion for families that are actively engaging in working with school staff to improve attendance and have documented improvement. And 2G strikes as it is addressed in the aforementioned language. And that concludes the presentation on all of the proposed revisions and the adoptions. At this time, we can take questions.
Thank you very much. Do committee members wish to make comments or ask questions? Yes, Director Taylor.
Thank you, Chair Peterson. On 8.14, and I believe it's 2A, I just want to go to it to make sure because I took a couple notes on it. I guess within this system, it seems like it already escalated to where it is then reported to, what does it say, the police or authorities. I thought it was like a couple levels in process before it gets generated into that level. It went from the first process automatically to that police contact.
Administration?
Director Taylor, members of the committee, can I just ask a clarifying question? One, are you in the procedure or are you in the policy?
I want to see. When I wrote it on the page, it was page 1 through 4, and it was 2A, and it was 8.14. But let me go back because we was just on the last one.
Okay.
I think it was the red line.
Was
Yeah,
it
in the event, yeah,
Policy or procedure?
policy.
Okay.
Yep, policy. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
So when it speaks to the attendance officer, that is the school personnel. It's not, it's the attendance secretary at the school staff.
So, and Chair Peterson, I just want to read it. In the event that the student's absence is not an excused absence, the student's parent or guardian should be notified as required by state statute. The school shall seek police cooperation in the apprehension and detention of truant students and their parents. Call for them, Wisconsin statute. So it doesn't say the attendance, it says the police.
I'm sorry. So we have to mention that as a matter of protocol in all of the documentation. At this level of identifying truant students, a referral is not made. So a referral is not made to officers until that TABS referral is until after a TABS referral and/or a DA referral. So it's not a normal course of action.
Follow-up, Director Taylor?
Yeah, thank you. And I understand, and this was a lot of work, so I thank you for it, but absolutely, because it is policy and procedure, like that step automatically goes from one into the police contact. So I just want to understanding too, and hopefully for those listening live, we're putting it in here because we are mandated and required, because it seemed like we're making this adjustment. And so if I were to look at this policy, if I go with like like immediately it says this. So I just want to make sure that we're putting it in here because we're mandated, not because we're putting it in here, as an apprehension. And if that's the case, then I'll leave it if we're not mandated. But if we're putting it in here as a step to being the last resort in the truancy policy, I think it should state that.
Administration.
Yes, Chair Peterson, members of the committee, Matthew Boswell, Senior Director of the Department of Student Services. Also, as it reads through 2A, you see shall be notified as required by state statute. So we are putting in there as a requirement of Wisconsin state statute. So we wanted to make sure we made that clear. This is put in there as a result of Wisconsin state statute. Thank you.
Director Taylor?
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that, like, we were on the record stating that we're mandated to put it in there. This isn't an NPS policy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other committee members or have questions? Director Leonard?
Just a clarification. So a couple of times I read in there, they're both on page 3s, both with procedures and policy. When you cannot get hold of a student, it says by another means, and I'm just curious what that means. I think I know what it is over the years of being a teacher, but I'm just curious as to what that means.
Administration.
Director Leonard, members of the committee. The first initial communication is school messenger that goes out to the parents. If that message is not received, the school receives a log of all those communications. So the other means can be a follow-up phone call. It can be a visit to the family.
Okay. Director Gokul-Gandhi and then Director Simpson.
Can you clarify the number of, hold on one second, what is it, the days of a habitual truant? Where does that number come from? 5?
Administration.
Director Gokul-Gandhi, the number of days for a habitual truant is defined by state statute.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Director Simpson.
Just a couple of things to clarify. So, and I'm going to lose my spot. So I'm looking at the level 3 for truancies, which is on page 5. And I'm just looking at the language. So it says that the school may generate a TABS referral. So they don't have to. So they can do lots of intervention on the front end of that. So I just want to make sure that we're being clear and intentional about the fact that as a district, I would hope that we're taking the steps to be more proactive than going to tabs. So I just want to clarify that that language is in there in order to give schools, lots of time to get involved prior to any kind of reporting that would go to a tabs program.
Administration.
Director Simpson, members of the committee. So prior to TABS referral being issued, there are a number of phases and steps that schools take to address truancy, beginning with that 5-day letter and then the follow-up with the 8-day notification. School staff engages in a plethora of activities designed to increase and work with families to improve student attendance.
Follow-up?
No, I just want to make sure that that's the clear, that they may report it. It doesn't have to be it's not our first step or even a step that they necessarily have to take. My second question was then around tardy, and maybe I missed it, but for students who are tardy due to a bus not showing up or being late, is that also excuse them from being marked tardy? I just didn't happen to catch the language, and like I said, it could be in there and I just missed it.
Administration.
Director Simpson, members of the committee. As it relates to the bus not showing up, there are attendance codes that schools have the ability to use, and they depend on what the circumstance is, whether or not it's considered, the student would be considered exempt from attending as opposed to being absent. And so as it relates in the policy for here, when that student leaves the bus stop after 20 minutes during extreme weather, the parent has to notify the school first. In the event that the parent notifies the school and the school can verify with transportation that the bus did not come at the appropriate time, then at that point, the student is excused from attendance.
What about being marked tardy, though?
So that's a little different. When there's also a bus that an attendance code for late bus, and that too excuses from attendance.
Okay, thank you. Just, like I said, I may have missed that language in there. Just wanted to make sure that that was also a part of our tardy plan, that students and families wouldn't be penalized because of bus-related issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Director Taylor?
Thank you, and this is more just for administration. I know a few years ago, and we had, and I know I talked about it before, attendance liaison, and I just want to know where we are as a district with that, because I thought those were great individuals that actually went out and was very proactive in getting answers and getting assistance to those families that needed some extra assistance to ensure that they can return to school.
Administration.
President Peterson and members of the committee, prior to the pandemic, we had a little over 30 attendance liaisons that helped us out in schools where we had attendance issues. They would go to those schools, serve and support the school social worker, the school administration, to go out to families to find out where those students are and try to get them back in school as fast as possible. However, during the pandemic, those positions went away because they were LTEs that we had. And then so what we're looking at right now is to bring those individuals back for the upcoming school year because they did some amazing work for us. The Office of School Administration have a attendance plan that's going right now, and one of the things that they are looking at adding to that is the attendance liaisons because they truly made a difference in attendance in our schools.
Follow-up?
I just want to say thank you, and I'm glad to hear that they're coming back. I thought I was going to have to write up a resolution or something to bring them back, but they are greatly needed, so I look forward to seeing that in place, probably not from this end, but from the other end. It really did make a difference in our babies being able to attend and helping those families with some of the barriers. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comment on this item?
Have, not item number 1. We do not have any public testimony on this item. However, I do have a question regarding the policy. Regarding procedure 8.13, parent 2, parent A, number 2, parent A, parent 2, and number 3, parent A, number 2. There's a reference to documentation being kept for student absences for a maximum of 2 years, and just wanted clarification on that time frame, where that time frame derived from.
Hey, administration.
Dr. Mann, members of the committee, that are derived from state statute.
Okay. Mr. Chair,
Follow?
members of the committee, I just wanted to be sure that there was some directive, because that is different than what the district's records retention and destruction policy is. And so I wanted to make sure that it was a legal requirement, and if not, that the policy could be adjusted to follow the district's records retention and destruction policy.
Okay. Any other comment from the administration?
Mr. Chair, if we could be provided that state statute at some time before the full board meeting.
Okay,
Thank you.
we can do that. What's the pleasure of the committee with respect to this item? Dr. Gokul Gandhi.
I move that we adopt this item with the administration's recommendations.
Great. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, will the secretary please call the roll?
On Director Gokul Gandhi's motion to approve the administration's recommendation relative to the request to approve revisions to Administrative Policy 8.13, student attendance, absences, and tardies, and Administrative Policy and Procedure 8.14, truancy, and to adopt Administrative Procedure 8.13, student absences, attendance, and tardies. On the motion as read into the record, Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Aye.
Chair Peterson.
Aye.
That's 5 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item number 2, action on a request to approve revisions to Administrative Policy 8.52, bullying, and to adopt Administrative Procedure 8.52, student bullying. The recommendation is that the board, 1, approve revisions to Administrative Policy 8.52, bullying, and 2, adopt Administrative Procedure 8.52, student bullying.
Will the administration please present this item?
Good evening, Chair Peterson and members of the committee. This evening, the administration brings revisions to Administrative Policy 8.52 related to bullying. Also, we bring for adoption Administrative Procedure 8.52 related to student bullying. This evening, I have with me Kim Morath, Supervisor of Violence Prevention Program, and Mr. Matthew Boswell, Senior Director of Student Services, to share the revisions and the requested adoption. Following the presentation, we'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Ms. Morath.
Thank you. Chair Peterson, members of the committee, my name's Kim Morath. I'm the Social Emotional Learning Supervisor. I'm going to walk you through the revisions made to the bullying policy and the new bullying procedures. The policy changes and new procedures were developed after consultation with national experts, research into best practices, and reviewing recommended documents. These were also reviewed by school-based and district-level staff before being approved by the city attorney. We'll begin with the policy. In general, the revisions to the policy were made to support a few objectives. First and foremost, the current policy was a mix of policy and procedure. So the revisions remove the procedural elements from the policy and separate them into a companion procedural document. Additionally, the policy was reviewed and revised to provide clarity and uniformity of language. In bringing clarity to this document, the first change you'll notice is the addition of the word student in the title of the policy. Similarly, you'll see most references to bullying behavior involving adults was removed from the document. This change is consistent with the state model bullying policy and was done for 2 reasons. First, all policies within Section 8 are student policies. Additionally, adult behavior is reflected in Administrative Policy 6.03 and 6.07, which address staff bullying behavior toward other adults, as well as behavior directed towards students and the public. Under the definition, you'll see streamlining of the definition language, including specific reference to the use of an imbalance of power to control or harm others. The reference to the motivation of bullying, including the protected status classes, has been struck through only because it's been moved under letter B instead as further explanation of bullying. You will see indirect and cyberbullying struck through, but again, that's because they have been separated below that into two distinct items which describe indirect bullying and provide an expanded definition of cyberbullying. Under prohibitions, section 3A, the language that is struck through is separated into the subsequent B and C, which further describes educational environments and cyberbullying prohibitions. The policy revisions add a section on prevention of bullying, which you'll see as section 4, which speaks to specific types of prevention activities. Under section 5, reporting and investigating, the procedural language has been removed and a reference to Administrative Procedures 8.52 has been added. You'll also notice in this section alignment of language specifically updating all appropriate instances of the word will to instead say shall, which is mirrored for consistency in the procedural document. Finally, under sanctions and supports, you'll see language added that's consistent with our discipline practices, requiring administrators to make attempts to use disciplinary alternatives for offenders of bullying and/or those who engage in retaliation against those who report bullying. You'll also see language outlining supports to both prevent and respond to bullying behavior and language about ensuring the safety of all parties involved. Next, we'll move over to Administrative Procedures 8.52 regarding student bullying, which brings some consistency to reporting, investigation, documentation, and intervention. The introductory paragraph describes the intended use of these procedures for documenting, investigating, and responding to incidents of student-involved bullying. A cross-reference is also included that when the bullying report involves a staff member, Administrative Policy 6.03 and/or 6.07 should be followed. The procedures, again, begin with a definition of bullying in comparison to a definition of conflict. This is an important distinction, as reports of bullying should be addressed differently than reports of conflict. Section 2 describes a process for receiving reports of bullying, including differentiating bullying from conflict and ascertaining the immediate safety needs of the students involved, including those who've been bullied, witnessed the bullying, or made the report. Section 3 outlines initial documentation of suspected bullying incidents by the adult who received the report and a timeline for entering that documentation. Section 4 outlines steps for the administrator to respond to the report, including parent notification, and again, prioritizing the safety needs of parties involved. Section 5 details the timeline and steps for investigating reports of bullying. This includes many best practices in disciplinary investigations, which administrators likely already follow. However, it also includes specific steps for documenting the outcome of the investigation, both if bullying is substantiated and if it's not. Section 6 outlines actions to be taken after completing an investigation. The first reference A is to again ensure the victim's sense of safety, as well as the sense of safety for others. This could include the continuation of strategies that were put in place during the investigation, but should be reflective of the unique needs in each situation. Section 6B includes some strategies which are not recommended in instances of bullying, specifically due to the potential for re-victimization. Even though specific restorative interventions are in the not recommended section for bullying, Section 6C introduces a restorative approach to discipline for bullying incidents, balancing the need for accountability and the need for supports. Discipline should occur in accordance with the Code of Classroom Conduct, with the potential for additional disciplinary alternatives, such as increased supervision, school service, and behavior planning. Supports include those strategies which are designed to build student skills in areas of need, such as relationships, social awareness, and empathy. Reflected in Section 6D is the need to follow up with victims of bullying to determine whether the behavior is continuing and if additional supports are needed. 6E speaks to the prohibitions of retaliation against those who make reports of bullying. And finally, 6F addresses specific situations in which the offender in a bullying situation is a student with disabilities to ensure that due process procedures regarding discipline are followed. All of those sections have been developed with the goal of bringing consistency to the reporting, investigation, documentation, and intervention processes.
Okay, thank Thank you very much. Do committee members wish to make any comments or ask questions? Director Simpson.
Yeah, just not so much a question, but just on the, sorry, now it's the policy section where we talk about bullying prevention, number 4, and, you know, kind of like the different ways that the district addresses that. I know morning meetings are suggested. Could you just give us a few more specific examples of places in our curriculum where it is, you know, something that would be found in part of the learning day?
Administration.
Director Simpson, Chair Peterson. So any community building type activities, the social emotional learning curriculum, social emotional skills are foundational to bullying prevention, so that's a universal curriculum we use in the district. Anytime our students are engaging in learning activities like a turn-in talk, that's engaging in peer relationship skills, it's building connections with others in your classroom. So the same thing when we have group projects, when teachers are setting expectations for here's how we're going to collaborate together in this activity. Those are types of activities that build social connections, that build classroom connection, and are ways to prevent bullying. And that's where you'd see bullying prevention come in during academic instruction.
Follow-up? Director Simpson?
No, and I'm assuming second step would be part of that as well, that's something that our students are exposed to where they're getting, you know, kind of like that direct instruction about about not being a bully or what that looks like or what to do and how to handle it.
Administration.
Director Simpson, Chair Peterson, members of the committee. Yes, second step is our Tier 1 Universal Social Emotional Learning Curriculum in the district. That program teaches explicitly some of the foundational skills of bullying prevention. So it talks about empathy, emotion management, friendship skills, problem-solving skills, assertiveness skills, so those pieces that are important for bystanders as well as those who are victimized or who are offenders of bullying even. There is a supplementary unit, the bullying prevention unit, which all of our schools have access to as well, and it is embedded into the middle school curriculum.
Thank you. And I just want to give a shout out for the Second Step program. My granddaughter comes home frequently referencing Second Step, so it has an impact, and she uses it frequently in discussing, you know, just things that happen with, you know, friends at school or things in the neighborhood. So it is a curriculum that makes an impact. Thank you, yes. And I just wanted to make sure that, you know, the listening audience had some real specific examples of how we're addressing it as a district. Thank you.
Dr. Simpson, I have a question for you. How old is your granddaughter?
She's in K-5.
Yeah,
So it's
so start
the
early.
highlight of her, I'm not kidding, the highlight of her week.
Great. Other members of the committee wish to make a comment? Okay, Director Leonard.
So as a middle school teacher for 28 years, this was probably the toughest condition to handle. So I'm only going to make a comment on this because I had less problems with it because I found that the best way to deal with something like this is to deal with it very quickly and up front. And I can't say how this works. I get a number of complaints over the course of every year, every week. And I'm curious as to how, I see here that when I was reading the policy and the procedures, you want any of those reports that become egregious to be taken care of within one day or by the end of the school day for those parents. Is that correct?
Administration.
Director Leonard, Chair Peterson, members of the committee. The initial report should be made initially we want to make sure that the parents are notified of any incidents by the end of that day, that a report has been made. And then the investigation would begin immediately following that. The outcome of the investigation may not be known for several days. I think that says the investigation could take up to 10 days. But again, as quickly as possible within that time frame, understanding that various interviews might have to be conducted, witness accounts, things like that.
Any follow-up?
No, that's good. That's fine. Just wanted to clarify that.
Very good. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do have requests for public testimony. We have one individual registered to speak virtually, and then we have in-person testimony. Would you like to go to the,
Virtual first.
okay, great. Can you go to the virtual testimony? Okay, thank you. Ben Cross, please state your name, spell your last name, and begin your testimony.
So I think I signed up both virtually and in person.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I was unaware. Okay.
That's fine, Ben. No,
So we will go to the order that we have the
Oh, I see.
individuals
Yeah.
in the speaker queue.
right.
Sorry.
You'll get
Thank
your
you.
choice. I mean, you'll get your opportunity, excuse me, yes. Okay, the first speaker who signed up was Devon Ray. Excuse me if I butchered your name. I'm
Please
sorry.
state your name, spell your last name, and begin your testimony. Thank you.
Is due. In this case, you deserve credit for understanding that administrative procedure was needed to go hand in hand with this bullying policy. So for that, I applaud you. However, it should have happened sooner. It should be required that the board adopt step-by-step instructions of what is to be expected of staff. There should never be a policy that involves administrative accountability without subsequent documentation for how that should be implemented by the said staff, and how parents can expect things to be handled. One without the other is frankly just negligent. Within this, though, there are also measures that need to be addressed to ensure proper care is taken. It is unproductive to have a policy that states what a member of staff must do in a situation, but then not have equally direct consequences for what will happen if they do not. Your proposed policy wording allows for staff to know what is expected of them, but fails to offer any accountability. There should not be any loopholes when you are discussing adults who are in charge of the safety of and well-being of other people's children. Your policy should not lead a reader to believe that you might make others do their jobs. Parents and community members should know without a doubt that what is stated will take place. Policies and procedures are worthless if there's no follow-through, and that has been a consistent problem here. What good are documents if they're not implemented? What good are laws if they're not followed? If someone broke into your home, you would likely expect the police to do their job. But what if they said, oh, that law only states that we may hold them accountable, not that we will. I hope that for the sake of the safety of all the children, that you are not just checking a box here and doing this to throw a Band-Aid on all of your failures. I hope that you truly do understand the importance of accountability and trust and transparency within a district. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Amanda Hanson.
Please state your name, spell your last name, and begin your testimony.
Amanda Hanson, Hanson.
Thank you.
Back again. We all know why this is being done right now. It's nice, regardless of how pathetic it is. I had to fight my way to the federal level to get any of you to act. I see you added bullying between staff and student. Exactly what happened to my son. What I also see is a huge loophole, left at the demise of your discretion. Your revision states when an employee is found engaging in this behavior, they're considered to be in violation of Admin Policy 8.524A, a pre-existing policy, and may be subject to discipline. Maybe? And what about staff that have already engaged in this behavior? Don't forget the mandated reporting for this like item 1. If you proceed to sit here and say your ayes and approve this without changing that language, you failed again, just like you failed my son. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The bullying policy was revised in 2019, correct? Right? Yeah. Yet here we are again, approving this without changing that language to guarantee that our children are safe from adults that act this way shows all of us where your loyalties lie. And it isn't our children who you claim come first, right? Students come first, right? We discussed that last time I was here, right? Director Peterson, correct? Yes,
Continue.
yes.
Continue.
And while you're at it, fire her. Fire who did that to my son. Why is she still there? Fire her now. It's honestly disturbing that it takes so much from a person to get you to act. And when you do, you still try to be slick.
Next speaker is Deborah Keither.
Hello, Deb Keither, Kuether. I'm writing to provide input on the admin policy and procedure 8.52 on student bullying. It should be recognized that the team that wrote this policy did make a number of much-needed revisions. This was definitely a step in the right direction. This policy, though, was adopted in 2010. It was revised in 2014 and 15, and Paula Phillips wrote a resolution that was quite extensive. Yet here we are, like Groundhog Day, having the same discussions over again. Attention to this matter was way overdue. And furthermore, the fact that no administrative policy existed since 2011 made the policy dangling out there with no procedure, and it makes it open to discrimination. Authoring policies with no procedures is telling the what without defining the how. Policy with no procedure leaves implementation up to the person and is an invitation for discrimination. You are inviting that. A few considerations. Build communication and professional development so these policies and procedures are not just placeholders on the website. Make sure all parents and students are informed of the policy and procedure. Do not leave students and parents blindfolded to where information lies or clicking around trying to find information. Be proactive in your communication. You have resolutions that have all of this spelled out from 2019. Address adult to student bullying, and where those references lie in this policy and procedure, consider the circumstance where the administrator is the offender and allow parents to express concern about which administrator is assigned to investigate. Ensure that administrators that investigate know how to conduct fair and unbiased investigations. What training do they have? Review footage that exists so that you can be transparent and not hold that footage hostage. Probable cause
And Ben Hitchcock Cross.
Director Peterson, my name is Ben Hitchcock Cross. That's Hitchcock, capital CROSS. That's space,
Thank
no
you.
hyphen, if you please.
Thank you.
So the first thing I'd like to mention here is we're going again in this sort of circular progression here. We've gone to replacing will with shall. And I'm sure at some point will had already been replaced with shall, because shall is from 1950 here, and the more modern language will would have replaced that in due course. And I understand when attorneys like myself have to take a look at things, we like to add value to that, but seriously, you're deluding yourselves when you think that adding will is in any way more comprehensible to anybody else. I also want to echo other statements that people made, that you all need to define your terms. I've seen you sit up here time and time again and say, what about this? Will this be the case? And then the administration says, they give you a song and dance and they say whatever they want. And of course, you don't hold them accountable, but one of the reasons why you can't hold them accountable is because you don't define your terms. Director Peterson, I'm right here. That's right. So when you don't define your terms and you let them say whatever it is, then it's very difficult for you to hold them accountable, and that being your job, that's something you may want to look into and define your terms. So when you say what is egregious behavior, you're going to need to know what egregious means, so that they know what egregious means, so that students know what egregious means. So looking at the rest of this policy, I'm going to put on my 12-year-old hat here and think, when I'm looking at this policy, what does it say to me? It says there's one kind of bullying, and that's bullying from student to student. What about from adult to student? What about from teacher to student? That's not addressed in the policy anywhere. It may be addressed elsewhere, but how do the students know that? What message is that to them? There's one rule for students and another rule for adults. And that may be the way that you all behave, but that shouldn't be the message that's sent out to students. Now, finally, I want to say, I brought to your attention a bullying complaint. You did nothing. You didn't follow the statutes. You didn't follow your own regulations. You did nothing. How can you expect the administration to do something when you do?
Members of the committee, do you wish to make any comments or ask any questions? What is the pleasure of the committee with respect to this item? Director Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Peterson. I will ask that we send it without recommendation, seeing as if there are a couple more questions and comments that needs to come of this to the full board.
There's been a motion made to move this forward to the full board without recommendation. Any comments or questions? Madam Secretary, please take the roll.
Sorry about that. On Director Taylor's motion to move this item to the full board without recommendation from the committee, and that is on the request to approve revisions to Administrative Policy 8.52 Bullying and to adopt Administrative Procedure 8.52 Student Bullying. On the motion as read, Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Aye.
Chair Peterson.
Aye.
That's 5 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please, the next item.
The next item is item 3, action on a request to approve revisions to the Administrative Policy 5.04, use of drones on school property. The recommendation is that the board approve the revisions to Administrative Policy 5.04, use of drones on school property, as submitted in the attachments to this item.
Will the administration please present the item?
Good evening, Chair Peterson and members of the committee. This evening, the administration brings revisions to Administrative Policy 5.04 related to drones on school property. I have with me Eric Radomski, Manager of Technical Educational Learning, to share the revisions, and after which we'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Eric?
Good evening, Chair Peterson, members of the committee. My name is Eric Radomski, Manager of Career and Technical Education. We've made some modifications to the drone policy, Administrative Policy 5.04, so that our students and staff can use drones on school property for educational purposes and extracurricular activities. Our Project Lead the Way middle school curriculum now has a unit that includes drones, and we want to be sure that our students are able to fully participate in these curricular activities. In addition, we've begun to work with Carroll University and intend for our students to participate in a college drone course this summer. We anticipate there will be more and more opportunities for our students to learn about and work with drones in the future, similar to the growth we have seen with robotics. The modified policy would allow drones to be used in schools and outside on school property, provided 3 things are in place. Number 1, the staff operating the drone has the proper training, appropriate license, or has passed a test administered by the FAA to operate the drone. Number 2, prior authorization is granted by the regional superintendent. And number 3, the proper safety precautions are in place. That concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. committee. Anybody have any questions or comments?
I forgot I wasn't going to demo.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
I move approval of the item.
Okay. Just want to say that I've been to the robotic competitions. I'm looking forward to the drone competitions as well.
Absolutely. I do have I have an example if you want to see the kind of small drones we're talking about in our Project Lead the Way curriculum that you could fly inside with netting.
Oh, he gets to do
It's not a Reaper.
No. Are you going to fly it, Dr. Hill?
Well, there's a superintendent designee, you can get permission from him right now.
You give it to one student and stand there and get it right back. You don't want us to grab it.
Happy birthday.
Director Taylor, comment?
Just while we're looking, I absolutely, I know we hear a lot about NPS, but Project Lead the Way is one of the initiatives and innovative ways that get a lot of our babies involved that love coming to school. I was at Golda, and so it is a great program there. They tear down the door to get into Miss Gleason's classroom with Project Lead the Way. So great job on that. Yeah, Miss Gleason is great.
Any other comment or question? Okay, Madam Secretary, could you please call the roll?
On Director Gokul Gandhi's motion to approve the administration's recommendation relative to revisions to Administrative Policy 5.04, use of drones on school property, as outlined in the attachment to this item. On the motion as read, Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Aye.
And Chair Peterson.
Aye.
That's 5 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item number 4, which is action on revisions to Administrative Policy 7.35, Student Progress Reports to Parents and Guardians. Student progress reports to parents and guardians. The recommendation is that the board approve the revisions to Administrative Policies 7.35, Student Progress Reports to Parents or Guardians.
Thank you. Administration.
Good evening, Chair Peterson and members of the committee. This evening, the administration bring revisions to Administrative Policy 7.35 on student progress reports to parents and guardians. I have with me this evening Dr. Melanie Stewart, Director of Students Performance, to share the revisions.
Good evening. I'm Melanie Stewart, Director of Research Assessment and Data. And the administrative policy I bring to you tonight on student progress reports is really a change to increase communication with parents when a student is at risk of failing. So what this outlines is that we increase the number of times that faculty uses the already current venues of interim reports, comments, etc., to make certain that parents are made aware at the earliest point in time that a child may be at risk of failing. The hope then is to be able to intervene so that we can cut the number of student failures at the high school level. For seniors, the school counselors have a series of letters that go out during the senior year to make certain students are on track, and there is an appropriate letter that would be sent home for seniors if there's a child at risk of failing a course. So that is the updates to this policy for you to consider.
Very good. Any questions or comments from the committee? Director Leonard.
Yeah, this is an issue that has come up, especially I'm going to have to say more at the K-8 level. In high school, it seems like pretty timely. They have a set of protocols and a whole load of procedures, and they have counselors, et cetera. But at the K-8 level, in all honesty, I have seen that ball dropped even in the last 6 weeks. Okay, so parents will call me up and say, I was not aware of this. I think it's just something we have to really work on to make sure that we are on top of that obvious process. We have to tell parents, no matter how difficult that challenge is at times, we have to tell them, your child is failing, or, and to be honest, even before they get to that point, for some of us that were teachers, I was in contact with my parents almost bi-weekly, every 3 weeks at least, so there was never any need to have that concern. So I just want to reiterate how important that is. That is a due process, due diligence on our end, so thank you.
Administration wish to comment?
President Peterson, Director Leonard, thank you very much for your comments. That is covered under an additional policy about promotion and retention. And promotion and retention at the K-8 level, because we do standards-based grades, failing is not the issue, but the possible retention. The policy states, and this is aligned directly with state law, is that a child at risk of needing to be retained is that multiple interventions should have occurred. All of those should have a communication to the parent. It's a passive consent, but needless to say, parents should be aware that their child is in an intervention. You need to be in contact with the parent so that that contact and engagement occurs. And you need to also offer the parents or guardians extended learning opportunities, whether it's tutoring or programming, summer program, etc. So the process of communication at the K-8 level should occur earlier. State statute also has another component that occurs later in the school year. In MPS, we call it SPS, which is just we are looking at the state proficiency, we look at the child's progress, and then through teacher recommendation. That's at 4th and 8th grade. So there are processes in place, there are things, and if a school or is needing assistance or wanting more information, then they can reach out to my team because they work directly with schools to make certain that they are following the promotion and retention policies.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Seeing none, what's the pleasure of the committee? Director Leonard.
I move that we accept the revisions from the Administrative Policy 7.35.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Chair, we have no public request for public testimony on this item. On Director Leonard's motion to approve the administration's recommendation relative to revisions to Administrative Policy 7.35, student progress reports to parents or guardians, as attached to this item. On the motion as read, Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Aye.
Chair Peterson.
Aye.
That's 5 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, what's the next item on the agenda?
The next item is item number 5, which is an update with possible action on Resolution 2223R-3 on communications to the board. The recommendation is that the board reaffirms the attached policies.
Okay, administration.
M-
Oh, I'm sorry,
Mr.
just
Chair?
board.
Yes, the Office of Board Governance did conduct a review of the policies relative to communications to the board and looking at the requirements and expectations that are outlined in the policies. I did get a chance to speak with Dr. Posley and Mr. Chasen regarding these, and our recommendation is that the board reaffirms the policies.
Okay. Any questions or comments by the committee? Yes, Director Gokul Gandhi.
I appreciate that OBG and OAE and the Office of the Superintendent are reaffirming this. I think this was put forward, this was put forward just as to make it crystal clear that we are here to listen to concerns and we are responding to them as we receive them, and we take that very seriously. And so thank you for reaffirming this.
Any comment from the Office of Accountability or the administration?
President Peterson and members of the committee, the administration has worked along with the OAE as well as OBG, and we are ready to move forward with the reform.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from the public?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, we have no request for public testimony on this item. I'm looking at Director Gokagandi. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair,
That's right.
sorry.
I know we look alike. Sorry. Could you please call the roll?
No, we don't have a motion.
We need a motion. Director Gokagandi.
I moved approval of the item. Or do we need it? We don't even, I'm getting carried away. Was
Okay.
that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I move approval of the item.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, could please call the roll?
On Director Gokogandi's motion to approve the request to reaffirm the policies related to Resolution 2223R-3 on communications to the board. On the motion as read, Director Gokagandi,
Aye. You don't want to vote for me?
Director Leonard,
Aye.
Director Simpson,
Aye.
Director Taylor. Aye. Chair Peterson.
Aye.
That's 5 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item number 6, which is action on the proposed 2324 legislative agenda. The recommendation is that the board determine how it wishes to proceed relative to its legislative agenda that's attached to this item.
There he is. Mr. Theo, would you please talk to us?
Chair Peterson, members of the board, Chris Thiel, Office of Governmental Relations. The document you have before you is one that we develop and get affirmed by the board every 2 years as we head into the state's new legislative session. Many of the items in here are things that we have discussed over the months and years, and some of continue to be our areas of focus that the board has long supported. I should note that this document is a living document. We don't simply approve it every 2 years, but over the course of time, when board update and action takes place, we add that to the agenda to continue to develop the message that we're taking to the state and to the federal level. And this year, I think in particular, what we're seeing across the country, what we're seeing in this state as well, we have embedded in here the principles that are also part of board policy in terms of teaching, frankly, factual information to our children, right? Presenting the truth when we teach history. Being honest and unafraid about talking about the funding situation in the state of Wisconsin. We were just with some of our colleagues across the nation from other states, and although it was concerning to hear stories from there, we took strength from our partners, many of whom are in the Council of Great City Schools. We're seeing school takeover attempts. We're seeing some of these other policy shenanigans, I'll call them, not because of how the school districts are performing, but because they're willing to tell the truth in their states about what's going on and what their kids need. And by standing up for kids, standing up for the truth, that's getting a reaction in some places where suddenly, well, we're going to have a school takeover, or we're going to create some action against you. So this is something that we do. It's something that's part of our process, but just I think the board certainly has demonstrated in our conversations over the past months that it's important to continue to affirm what our students need and what we support. So happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you. Comments or questions by board members? Director Simpson?
Just a comment. So, I would just encourage everybody listening, all of our taxpayers in the city, to just take a look at this document. I think it's important and significant, and just to raise awareness in the general public about the things that we're advocating for. And I appreciate your work in doing that. But yeah, I just think it's a really important document, and encourage everybody to read it.
Thank you. Director Gokagandi?
I would like to echo the sentiments. This is such a comprehensive agenda that really builds on what we need to make sure we have thriving children. And the one thing I just wanted to read for our listening audience from this is how important funding for K-3 programming is. The research presented, it reads, and thank you for including this, research presented in the Journal of the American Medical Association demonstrates that the influence of poverty on children's learning and achievement is mediated by structural brain development. To avoid long-term costs of impaired academic functioning, households below 150% of the federal poverty level should be targeted for additional resources aimed at remediating early childhood environments. And we know that when we invest in our earliest learners, our outcomes later in life are just exponentially better. And so I just wanted to underscore how important it is to really focus on that K-3 funding, and that our legislature that's sitting on $7 billion of profit also understands that for the health and wellness of our economy and our workforce and the sustainability of making sure that our state is a viable option for people to move here, that this is really a priority. So thank you, Mr. Thiel.
Thank you. Other comments or comments from the administration? Well, it's Director Leonard first.
So yes, thank you, Chris. Obviously, I've been working with this forever that I can think of. I was looking at some notes. I had spoken to the board in 1993. That's the first year I was working as a teacher at MPS, and I was like, oh, wow. This has been going on forever. And even then, we were in that point where we were much better off than we are right now, to be honest with you. But I could see the games that were being played to maneuver public schools into a corner, and they did successfully do that, to be honest. Out of curiosity, tomorrow's event at Madison, what should I expect? What can be done? What are we actually doing tomorrow? I'll let you go ahead.
Mr. Thiel.
Chair Peterson, Director Leonard, I think you're referring to the Wisconsin Association of School Boards.
Yes.
Annual day at the Capitol.
Yes.
And so as part of that event that the Wisconsin Association of School Boards puts together, it's an event where school board members from across the state schedule meetings with their representatives to share what largely are the same stories about what's going on in school districts. I think this time going in, we have greater uniformity and directness than we've had in the past. And by that I mean our partners at the Southeastern Wisconsin Schools Alliance and others, and frankly, some of the leadership that we've been doing here and others have been doing, and I think we've held those folks up in the past. But simply to get back on pace with the rate of inflation for our students, we need $1,510 over this upcoming biennium. And we've got uniformity from our partners in asking for that. In order to get us anywhere close to where we once were as a state for supporting our students with disabilities, we need at least that 60% reimbursement rate for students with disabilities, and we've got strong support for that. So my hope is that those messages, not only the importance of backing them up with the real-life stories about what budgets are going through as we're looking at what we have to do with our local district budgets, but the need for those two policies in particular. All these policies in the document are important, obviously. But where we are seeing momentum, we are seeing some strength, is everybody going forward with the same message. So my hope is that tomorrow your fellow board members from wherever they may be from are walking into offices with those same messages, and we can really push that forward. Because if that doesn't happen, school districts are going to be, again, we are in a perilous situation. The situation will be more perilous. And so I think we really, for those legislators who are talking about different policies, if we're going to have a sincere and honest conversation about literacy in the state of Wisconsin, about reading, the resource element of that has to be part of the first two sentences out of our mouths, or their mouths, if we're really going to be getting after this. And so if we're just going to talk about policy without talking about resource, then we're not really being honest about what we need. So hopefully it'll be a good day. I think people are on the same page by and large tomorrow. And I think delivering those messages again and not letting up. I think you've seen, and people will see tomorrow, pivots away from that type of conversation. But if we don't get to 1510, if we don't get to 60% for reimbursement, then we're not really getting after what our students truly need.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any follow-up? Administration, do you have any comments?
President Peterson, members of the committee, the administration is standing behind the robust agenda that has been put forward. Have had a number of conversations with Mr. Thiel, as well as a number of board members about what needs to happen for children in this state, and it's on target to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Director Gokul Gandhi.
I move adoption of the 2023-2024 legislative agenda.
There is one, there is one person who asked to speak. Quinton Caliban. Sorry, I almost left you in the dust.
O-N.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. So yeah, I appreciate it. I hope that Mr. Thiel could clarify point 3 in the legislative agenda. So I'm so glad, first of all, that you're advocating for our special needs kids. I'd love to see 50% myself from the state, hopefully getting to like 2/3 between state and federal, which would fund about 1 special needs teacher per 8 students. So genuinely wishing you all luck. I'll call my legislators and people who are not my legislators and speak up to that. That said, on point 3, Mr. Thiel mentions a 90% reimbursement rate for private schools as comparison, and I couldn't find the provenance of that number aside from a WASB argument in 2018. So the special needs voucher covers about $5,000 over the cost of a voucher, which is only $40,000 per 8 kids, not enough to hire a staff member. And there is something called the SNSP Actual Costs Program that funds 90%, but it only serves literally 9 kids in the entire state. So as someone who hopes that the legislator really moves and funds our district kids and our charter kids and our voucher kids on special needs, I hope that Mr. Thiel could clarify that 90% calculation. And that said, I'm rooting for you all as you go forward with this on special needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the 90% issue. Mr. Thiel, could you just comment on that?
Certainly. We're using a 90% reimbursement rate as actually a shorthand for the most conservative way of looking at the level of reimbursement that students involved in the special needs scholarship program receive. So in state law, under the special needs scholarship program, 100% of special needs costs are funded up to roughly the $18,500 level. And then above that amount, the state reimburses 90% of whatever additional costs are there. So the statutory language doesn't have 90% specifically for that first piece of funding, but in actuality, for those who participate in the special needs scholarship program and for those students who have needs at or above that level, that is what they are in fact receiving. So in our state, back in the mid to late 1970s, we had a 70% reimbursement rate, and we now have two standards for how we support students with disabilities in our state in public schools and in private schools. And so we're in concert with other districts across the state asking for that 90% for our students as well.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
To approve the 2023-24 legislative agendas as attached to this item. Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Director Taylor.
Aye.
Chair Peterson.
Aye.
That's 5 ayes, the motion passes.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item number 7, which is a report with possible action on Resolution 2223R-11 on gender inclusion. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Administration.
Good evening, Chair Peterson and members of the committee. On October 27th of 2022, the board referred Resolution 2223R-011 on gender inclusion to the committee, to LRP committee. As directed by the resolution, we are bringing possible recommendations to the committee this evening regarding this resolution. I have with me this evening Sean Kane, Director of Facilities and Maintenance Services, and Ronnie Rivera, Coordinator of Gender Identity and Inclusion, to share the possible recommendations along with further next steps that we plan to take, after which we will be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. Sean?
Thank you, Dr. Posley. Good evening, everyone. Chair Peterson, members of the committee, Sean Kane, Senior Director for Facilities and Maintenance. We're looking to go through the slideshow. Okay, thank you. So in response to the resolution 2223R-011 approved by the board, as Dr. Posley indicated, the team took a closer look at the resolution bullet items that included the recommendations. And the recommendations were for administrative policy regarding gender-inclusive restrooms, recommendations for procedures in which the district solicits, collects, and reports pronouns on district documents, recommendations for district-wide training, including but not limited to LGBTQ plus and gender inclusion awareness. This slide that we have represents our 5 priorities for success. Next slide is general neutral bathrooms are defined as bathrooms that are accessible to any student person regardless of their gender identity, expression, and sexual orientation. Prior to making recommendations for policy relative to gender-inclusive restrooms in other facilities, it was imperative that we first determine the number of schools that currently have gender-neutral restrooms. We have asked building operations staff to work with school leaders to complete a survey indicating the number of gender-neutral bathrooms with signage. As the results came in, it confirmed pretty much we already knew. There are very few schools that already have gender-neutral restrooms with signage. In terms of consistent signage, there are several versions that were created by schools that will need to be revisited. And as if you look at the slide, there's 3 columns that identify the amount of gender-neutral classrooms that are done as part of the survey, and then also schools reporting, and then also the bathrooms with the gender-neutral signage. We just have to alert everyone that the questionnaire was completed by school staff, and verification of code requirements still need to be determined by a contracting consultant. With that in mind, it is also important that we engage with the consultant to determine if existing facilities can accommodate the needs required by this resolution or if renovations will be needed. This will have to be determined on a site-by-site basis. Once the district assessment is complete, design and construction plans will need to be generated to complete the scope of work. It's important to understand the fiscal impact and estimated timeline for a project of this magnitude. The cost of conducting a district-wide assessment of all schools is estimated to be at $150,000 and would take approximately 4 months to complete. Assuming that approximately 100 sites needed minimal modifications or upgrades, the cost would be about $1 million for design and construction services. Theoretically, this can be completed in 4 months. If the assessment identifies major renovations, that the estimated costs and timeline for completion significantly increases. Assuming that there are 100 sites that would need anywhere between $1,000 and $100,000 worth of renovations, it is recommended that you allocate $10 million for this potential project. I'll turn it over to Mr. Rivera now.
Oh, awesome. Chair Peterson and members of the committee, Ronnie Rivera here. I'm comfortable with any and all pronouns, and I'm the Coordinator 3 out of the Department of Gender and Identity Inclusion. So identity name changes and pronouns. Here in MPS, we have our Gender Inclusion Guidance document. This document provides recommendations and guidelines for supporting gender-diverse youth. This document is available for staff, students, and parent guardians here in MPS. Within the Gender Inclusion Guidance document, we have forms for students to utilize should they wish to change their legal name to an affirmed name. We use the language affirmed name to distinguish that our youth who wish to use an affirmed name are not changing their name legally within the state of Wisconsin. They're simply using an affirmed name that they wish to utilize in all records and within our information systems here in MPS. Speaking of information systems, we have Infinite Campus, which now has the ability to identify affirmed pronouns for our students that wish to do so. Within MPS, for students that wish to change their legal name on MPS records and information systems to an affirmed name, those students that request to do so need to receive parental permission if they're under the age of 18. LGBTQ plus district services. So we are fortunate that we have the Department of Gender and Identity Inclusion where we can provide LGBTQ plus services. We provide LGBTQ plus awareness trainings or LGBTQ plus 101 trainings, and we offer that, that's offered at the request of schools, departments, staff, on an ongoing basis. We also offer opt-ins, opportunities for staff and schools to receive this service through the Thursday updates or where they can register using the LMS. We also offer the GSA Gender Sexuality Alliance, the GSA Advisor Collective for staff here in MPS. This is a space for GSA advisors to foster community, to receive resources that they can bring back to their GSAs, and to learn about best practices that they can utilize with their GSAs so that they're sustainable in their MPS schools. We also offer the LGBTQ+ book study as a service for MPS staff in schools. This is a professional development opportunity should schools and staff and school administrators and leaders wish to address their school culture and climate around LGBTQ+ issues. They are able to do so through the means of an LGBTQ+ book study. And lastly, I'm excited to announce to say that we have the Welcoming Schools Partnership on the horizon. This Welcoming Schools Partnership is through the HRC, through the Human Rights Campaign, and it is a comprehensive bias-based bullying prevention program where schools can select which modules that they would like to focus on, whether it be intersectionality, bullying, that supports and addresses the needs of LGBTQ+ kiddos, and also addressing gender inclusion in MPS schools. Next steps. Gender-neutral facilities. Our short-term next steps regarding gender-neutral facilities, gender-neutral bathrooms identified at each MPS facility. And another next step for a short-term next step for gender-neutral facilities is posting gender-neutral signage that follows uniform codes. So do all the gender-neutral signage have the same codes across schools in MPS? Do all the signs look the same? Our long-term next steps for gender-neutral facilities. Review and/or revise Administrative Policy 5.01 facilities, conduct district-wide assessments, and lastly, developing a SOP, a standard operating procedure for gender-neutral bathrooms. So for school administrators and leaders who are looking to provide gender-neutral bathrooms in schools, what does the process look like for those leaders in schools? Who is involved? And what are the steps that they have to follow to ensure that that gets taken place at their schools? Next steps continue to create administrative policy and procedures at 8.54, gender, identity, and inclusion. We have our gender inclusion guidance and having policy and procedures and transferring the guidance of recommendations in a gender inclusion guidance document so that there's expectations, clear expectations for MPS staff regarding gender, identity, and inclusion. Update the gender inclusion guidance for distribution. Create an SOP, a standard operating procedure for pronoun collection and Infinite Campus, while also supplementing that with training so that each school, there's a designated member that is charged with obtaining pronouns and knows what to do should a student request to have their legal name changed to infirm name in MPS records and documents. And then lastly, providing LGBTQ+ training for all current and new staff, because the sooner that MPS staff all are all on the same page regarding LGBTQ+ students and have a shared understanding and common language, the sooner that our LGBTQ+ kiddos can benefit from that shared understanding.
Thank you. That concludes our presentation, and we're prepared to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Committee members, Director Gogolgandhi, then Director Leonard. Go ahead, Director Leonard. Go ahead.
Some questions. So first of all, I guess I don't know how to ask this question. Just for signage in the buildings, how many buildings do we know have an available bathroom where it would just be a matter of signage?
Administration.
Chair Peterson, Director Leonard, members of the committee, Sean Kane, Senior Director for Facilities and Maintenance. What we have to do, the survey that was done was just based on building engineers walking through with building leaders. So what we have to do is hire a consultant and get better confirmation because it all depends. I mean, when you look at a publicly accessible toilet that's from a corridor, everyone has access to get to that. You know, if someone's maybe referring to something as a staff lounge toilet or maybe a principal's toilet, et cetera. So those are things that have to be evaluated. And again, it's a matter of seeing what, I mean, schools are big and small. We have elementaries all the way to big high schools. So that's part of the consultant that we need to have that assessment, because just the manpower and resources to try taking on with the volume of ESSER work for our department is just overwhelming. So that's why we'd have to hire someone to give us that assessment.
Yes, I do. So, do you have a guideline of when that could possibly happen? Do you need anything from us at the same time?
Chair Peterson, Director Leonard, members of the committee, well, we'd look to do the assessment would actually take 4 months to get done. But, you know, just if from a budgeting standpoint, allocating dollars, you know, we'd have to get an RFP to go out, you know, solicit bids, you know, conforming to 3.09 board policy. And, you know, at that point, when we're anticipating the contract would be about $150,000, you know, we'd have to bring that forward for school board approval. So it's realistically, once we get that contract awarded, you know, that's about, I'd say, the clock starts ticking to get that. And the anticipation would be is, you know, taking a look at the assessment, review it with the administration, you know, reporting back to the board.
Thank you. And then just one quick other question. Were there any ESSER dollars set aside for this or no?
Administration.
Chair Peterson, Director Leonard, members of the committee, no, because just due to the time frame that we'd be looking to get this done, you know, even if we did the front end design, I mean, because right now you'd have to look at, do the assessment piece, which takes time, and then at that point it would determine, okay, if we need to solicit design services that include architects, mechanical, plumbing engineers, electrical engineers, et cetera, you know, that time frame by, you know, even in that point, you'd have to bid that out again, conforming to board policy to get that. So realistically, the time frame by the time, if you're looking to utilize ESSER dollars, ESSER $3 in particular, my expectation would be that the deadline would already pass. So it wouldn't fit in the timeline, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
President Peterson and members of the board, one of the things that we were looking at is to take a look at doing this through the regular budget this year.
Okay. Any other comments or questions by the board members? Director Gokul-Gandhi, and then Director Simpson.
Mr. Kane, I just have a question. So the assessment that you're saying, can that just be rolled into the part of the facilities and maintenance plan that you guys are going to be redoing because of new costs? Have we not talked about updating our facilities, master facilities and maintenance plan before in committee?
Administration, go ahead.
Chair Peterson, Director Gokul-Gandhi, members of the committee, Sean Kane, Senior Director, Facility Maintenance Services. I just may want to be clear, are you referring to like the long-range facilities master plan? Because that was something that was done back, I want to say 2018, so there's not one that's been done. But, I mean, this is kind of a separate piece, in my opinion. I mean, if you're maybe referring to maybe the space utilization.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing that's underway. That's a separate item, so no, it would not be rolled up into that.
Dr. Gokul-Gandhi.
And would there be opportunity to do that just with our strategic plan as we're setting priorities for the next couple of years, you know, as we have a whole division that's working towards a policy and implementation? I think for us to affirm that this is a priority for us, you know, could we make that a part of the space utilization plan so that we're not creating another expense, but instead rolling this into sort of the scope of work that we're already conducting?
Administration.
President Peterson and members of the committee, the space utilization piece is already on the way and almost wrapping up, to my understanding. So we won't be able to go back and put it there. But what we have decided to do is to roll it into the work that we plan to do for this year out of this year's budget to try to pick that cost up so that we can get that taken care of.
Follow up?
Yep, just two more things. I'm really excited about the Welcoming Schools program. You know, Ronnie, if you could maybe elaborate a little bit. Today we talked about bullying, we're talking about truancy, we're talking about things that keep kids from coming to school and feeling supported. And I just think that this program is really exciting. So if you could just maybe quickly give us a little snippet of what all that includes, that would be really great.
Chair Peterson and members of the committee, Ronnie Rivera, Coordinator 3. The Welcoming Schools partnership is through the Human Rights Campaign. It is a comprehensive bias bullying prevention program. We are going to be training 20 facilitators across MPS, including the members from the Gender and Identity Inclusion Department. And through the Welcoming Schools partnership, we will have an opportunity to provide additional training, professional development, lesson plan support, resources to schools, staff, administrators across MPS. So when we're thinking about administrators who are looking at their SIP goals, they're looking at their strategic planning, and they want to improve how we're embracing diverse families at the elementary level. Oh, look, the Welcoming Schools program has a module that addresses welcoming diverse families. Or, oh, we want to look at addressing bullying. The Welcoming Schools also offers a module on that. There are 7 modules that schools can choose to focus on for the school year. And so within the Welcoming School facilitators, the 20 of us, will be able to respond to those requests and needs of those schools to support them through that module for the school year.
Yep, and just my last comment, I hope, that we can really require PD for staff. We know that Gen Z, 3 of 5 young people now identify under the umbrella of LGBTQIA+, and so as we welcome new students and families into our district, this shouldn't be just something we're doing over here. I really hope that we see it as an integrated part of not only our extracurricular activities, but also our curriculum to teach about LGBTQIA+ history, not just during the month, but during the whole school year, which creates an environment where our students and families know that it's not just, oh, we think about you one month out of 12, we think about you all the time, and are thinking about how we're creating environments that are well suited for you. So thank you so much for your work.
Thank you. Dr. Simpson.
So Director Gokul-Gandhi mentioned my first comment, which was about the Welcoming Schools. I just want to applaud the work that your department is doing, and was very excited to hear about the Welcoming Schools initiative. I think it's so important, and yes, ties in so well with just the conversation we were having earlier on bullying and knowing how important it is to address this issue district-wide, especially with our LGBTQ community. One of the goals that we want to do when we are thinking of educating our students, which Mr. Thiel spoke to, was like not having a limited curriculum, or, a curriculum that's excludes, history or a certain group of people. So I think it's just really important as a district that we're taking this down. So very excited to hear that. I just had a question in terms of, it's a newer program in the district. So are you seeing sort of like a gradual uptick of requests for professional development, or some of the things that you mentioned here? Are you seeing an uptick in requests for PD or awareness brought to you, like through schools reaching out to your department saying, hey, these are some things that we're looking for, how can you help us? So just wanted to know kind of where it's at with that.
Administration.
Chair Peterson and members of the committee, Ronnie Rivera, Coordinator 3. We are constantly receiving requests to provide services across the district, recognizing that our department not only provides services to LGBTQ+ kiddos, but girls of color as well, and recognizing that a lot of time our students live at both those intersections of those identities. Regarding requests for LGBTQ+ services across MPS, we have requests from school administrators. I have a kiddo that's identifying, I have a young kiddo, for example, identifying as trans. How do I support this kiddo? Oh, I'm realizing that a lot of my staff has questions around pronouns. Can we provide a training? We also receive those requests and referrals from students. We have our gender info email where students, staff, parents, guardians are able to submit a request for our services. And then when we receive those requests in collaboration with other departments here, we're able to assess how we can support the needs of those families or students or staff. because it's not just training. Sometimes it's sitting in a meeting advocating for the needs of students at the school because the leaders or school administrators do not understand. Or sometimes it's sitting on a phone call with a parent and walking them through what pronouns means because the newly outed transitioning child identifies as transgender. So we are here and we're excited to continue to do this work, and looking at the data and the needs of our students here in MPS, there is a large need.
That's great. Thank you. It sounds like you're busy and a well-utilized resource for our students and our families. So thank you very much.
And I'll echo the same. Thank you for the work that you've been doing, and keep it up. Any other comments, questions? What's the pleasure of the board? Madam Secretary?
Mr. Chair, we have no request for public testimony on this item, and there is no required action by the board.
Right, okay. Well, then, take us to our next item, please.
Mr. Chair, that was the last item on tonight's agenda.
Oh, okay. This meeting is adjourned.